Hey, so today I'm going to talk about releasing old trauma. Unresolved trauma is one of the most common things that holds people back. Sometimes people don't even acknowledge or really understand that they've had trauma, or they know they've had it and they don't understand why some of the patterns of chronic stress hold on because they've talked about it, they have been to therapy, they've worked through it. And so I want to talk about why old trauma stays stuck and what you need to be able to do to release it. My name is Rochelle, and I have been a trauma therapist for over 25 plus years, and I now help women in a transformational coaching program. First of all, how do we know that old trauma is stuck? Well, there's some very common things that we can think of, like when that memory comes up, we are completely disarmed. There's something from the past that we can't stand to think about, that we kind of push down, and we might have intrusive thoughts, or we might have avoidance patterns. Another way, though, that we can know that old trauma is stuck is maybe that our body starts showing the symptoms of it. Maybe out of nowhere, we start having panic or anxiety, or even physical manifestations of stress held in the body is not uncommon. And maybe we have been pushing it down for so long, and I'll talk in a little bit about why the body holds it and how that happens, that we don't even necessarily make the connections between the symptoms that we're having. So maybe we have mind racing, maybe we feel angst inside, maybe there's emotional reactivity, maybe there's gut issues, skin issues, headaches, unexplained pain, high blood pressure. We might notice some of those symptoms. One of the things with trauma is that we are very adaptive. And so most of the women I work with are, high achieving. They've outperformed their trauma. They have gone on to build a different life. They have gone on to get to a safe situation. And so they're looking around and saying, things look pretty good. I don't understand why I'm feeling this. They've read the books, they've learned the things. I am a Christian. Most of the women I work with are Christians. They have a strong faith, so they know truth, but they can contrast truth against, why aren't I feeling this peace inside? So a lot of the women that I work with have a very strong, what we call frontal lobe, right? They're competent, intelligent, capable, kind, caring, make wise decisions in their life. But one of the things that's really important to understand about trauma is that trauma is not stored in the frontal lobe. Trauma really impacts the regions of our brain that are the lower brain. And one of the things about traumatic memory, whether that's a physical memory, conscious memory that we have, where we can remember the event, we can remember how hard it was or how hard it felt, or it can be a somatic memory. And a somatic memory or implicit memory is something that's held in the body and the nervous system. So it might have happened pre-verbally. It might happen, through chronic stress in childhood. So maybe a chronic headache or chronic pain or restlessness inside, or a chronic hypervigilance stress response that's always turned on. So traumatic memory, when something really hard happens, the brain, the way it processes it, again, with fight or flight, is that the hippocampus isn't involved. And the hippocampus is the part of our brain that specializes in memory. So in the instance of like post-traumatic stress or something like that, we can remember the memory. We know that it was maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but every time it comes up, we are flooded with the same sensations, and we are actually having the same response. This is called an abreaction. So it's not like remembering, it's like reliving. When that event comes up, all of a sudden our body is reliving the same responses that we had in the time, because that memory is not time stamped. So what this means is that you can have something that you have talked ad nauseum about. You can have something that you've thought about. You can have something that you've, reasoned with a friend about, or even been to therapy about, and you've used your top brain, your conscious brain, to process it, but it's still stuck, because it's stuck and it's not been timestamped. It's not been re-encoded and integrated into the brain so that it can be released as a historical memory, just like other historical memories. So that's the first thing we need to understand, about releasing old traumatic memory is you have to work in the part of the brain where it actually is stored, and it has to be re-encoded, reprocessed, not just talked about, not just thought about. It really has to be reprocessed. Now, here's the really cool thing. We don't have to go back into all the details to do that. And I think one of the things that keeps it stuck for so long is people don't want to go back to it. They're like, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to think about that again. Here's the good news. You don't have to. You already are reliving it in your nervous system. All we need to do is to be able to change the patterns, because the second thing you need to understand about old traumatic memory or, chronic stress it's held in the body, in the nervous system. So rather than going back into the past to change something in the present, we can take the faster route, which is to change it in the present and re-encode the past memory. So what that means is that we are changing a nervous system response. We're actually changing the way our body responds. We're altering that stress response. As we do that, that old stuff begins to release. And this doesn't have to be a painstaking process. This is actually much gentler, much faster than going back and talking about old trauma and trying to say, what should I think about this? What should I say about this? What is the truth about this? Working through the body and through the nervous system is the very fastest way to change nervous system patterns. And the really cool thing about this is that God gives us a new set of neurons every day. Every day we have the opportunity to reprogram those responses. The bad news is, well, I don't know if it's bad news, it's just the way we were designed to be able to really be efficient and recall information and just do things on autopilot. It's not necessarily bad news unless we have a stress response that's outdated and it's running in our system every day. And so even when things are better and we can look around and say, wow, I made it out of that and how wonderful this is, and things are much better now, or I'm out of the danger, thank goodness. Like, even though we can look around and see that things are better, our body is stuck in that, that autopilot, that pre-programmed response. Shifting that in the body is really how we make nervous system change. And as we change things in the present, we're able to release those old memories, and people can go back to that memory and say, that used to really bother me. And now when I go back to that, someone on my call just last night, my program, she was going back to, she said, I realized my body was all out of sorts. And then I realized it was the anniversary of a really traumatic thing that had happened to her. And that's what the angst was about. And then she realized then I was filled with such joy because look how far I've come. Well, she was filled with the joy because she was able to re-encode the response, not because she could see how far I've come, but because she's been doing the nervous system regulation strategies that when those sensations came up, she could have experience a different change and she could move through that. And it was just so cool to see her talking about that and sharing about that and how that no longer has a hold on her. And so when we change things in the present, the past loses its grip over us. And it can, again, be a past memory, or it can just be this familiar thing that comes up, right? This familiar sensation of stress or emotional overwhelm. And the third thing to understand, so again, the first thing is how memory is encoded and, stuck in the past, and we need to update it. The second thing is working through the body. And another thing is that when we are looking at releasing old trauma, it is really about recognizing the reactive patterns that have come in defense of that. In suppressing it, we became someone who works really hard and achieves really high and manages everything really well and keeps things under control. And then we don't have to feel that uncertainty or fear. And it's led to burnout or a chronic pattern of stress. So those are the adaptive or reactive patterns that we've had that were caused by the trauma. Now the trauma is gone, but we're here and we're stuck in that chronic stress response. So learning the new patterns is super important. And this is one of the things that I've seen, as a therapist, the difference between working with people 1 hour a week and working with them in a really supportive way to fast track to, freedom, is that just like neuroplasticity. And I can liken this to, my daughter had a brain injury several years ago. It's been almost 6 years now, there was one identifying, okay, where's her brain stuck in inflammation? And we would go to these, I drove 3 hours one way to take her to these appointments, these neuro rehab appointments, and they were super, super helpful. And I would look forward to that 3-hour drive there and 3-hour drive back, because she would get relief when we went and we could do these exercises. But you know what really was important was coming home and having the exercises to do to retrain her nervous system. And that's what's missing. That's what's missing in almost all cases, is that people stay stuck for years because they don't have a daily plan where they are repatterning these nervous system responses. So they get relief in the therapy office, or they get relief when they go get a massage, or they take a vacation, but the stress comes right back because there hasn't been a systematic change. So I'm giving you the example of my daughter's brain injury in the neuro rehab. We did with that when she had post-concussion syndrome. You could think about the same when it comes to a physical injury. So my son had an ACL tear, right? There was physical rehab. So there was the surgery and there was the repair. Let's fix it. Then we have to strengthen those muscles. So neuroplasticity is about changing those reactive patterns. And when people can change those reactive patterns, then that it no longer has a hold on them because they've learned a different way of being. And I love helping women and men in my clinical practice, break free from this, because so many people believe that this is just the way they are, and they're just stuck and they can't be any different. Or they think, well, if I'm not always working and always achieving, then things are going to, all the balls are going to drop. It's not the case. We actually are much healthier, much more productive, much more creative when we can relax and operate from a place of creativity rather than defensive reaction or super drive. We don't want to live in overdrive. That's a great, fight or flight is fabulous for getting us out of really hard situations. It's a really heavy and hard way to live. And so I love breaking people free from that and seeing that all the resiliency that they got from the trauma that they overcame can now be used to live a life of freedom and really do amazing things. The second thing is, like I said, I'm a believer, and I see a lot of Christians feeling like that they've somehow just are not trusting God enough or are failing in their faith. And while that's not my job to determine, someone's heart, I know a lot of ministry leaders and people of strong faith and even missionaries have come and they already had a strong faith. They didn't need to fix their faith. What they needed to do was to change this nervous system response. So I love watching people be able to do that and be able to feel, the freedom that they were designed to feel. So in my opinion, some of the richest and most amazing people are the ones who've gone through some really hard things, but they've made choices and they're generational cycle breakers in many cases. And I love working with them. So if you're someone, if this message resonates with you, and if you are interested in knowing more about the brain and how the strategy that I use to help people break free, there is going to be a link below for a free training that I have. At the end of that free training, there's a link to apply to work with me if you would like support in getting those results even faster. But either way, it's going to be great information. If you like this information, you want more videos, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next training. I hope this was helpful and gave you some hope for moving forward.